My husband was keeping a mistress, young, fresh, uninhibited in bed. She gave him experiences he never had with me. He reminded her to take birth control. She pouted playfully and joked that she wanted to have his baby. He warned her, seriously, if you get pregnant, get an abortion, otherwise, we're done. Only my wife is allowed to have my child. Sounded romantic, didn't it? So, I told him, I'm pregnant. He fell silent, because we hadn't slept together in 5 years. Chapter 01. I cheated on you. I thought when Bruno heard that, he'd just ask, was it good? But instead, his brows furrowed slightly. He stared at me for a long time in silence. Didn't believe me? Oh, right. I'd lied to him once before, 5 years ago. I hated him so much. I almost went through with it, but at the last second, I came to my senses. Hurting myself to get revenge on him wasn't worth it, so I pushed away his best friend Kevin, got out of bed. Still, I marked myself with bruises and nail scratches, told Bruno I had cheated. Let's get a divorce. Bruno's eyes turned red immediately, but that was all. The moment I learned he had cheated, the elegant, composed woman I had always been crumbled. I hyperventilated, couldn't breathe. My hands curled up like claws from the panic. I thought I was going to die. Bruno stayed calm. He fetched a plastic bag to help me breathe again, calmly explained, calmly made promises. Elise, we've been married for 5 years. I'm a man. Eating the same dish every day gets boring. I'm under a lot of work pressure. Sometimes I just need to let off steam. But you're my wife. I have to respect you. Besides physical fidelity, I'll give you everything you want. Through teary eyes, I looked at him. I wanted to ask, do you still love me? But I said nothing. He had already cheated. Whether he loved me or not, no longer mattered. Chapter 02. I wiped my tears, washed my face, and said I wanted a divorce. Bruno wasn't surprised at all. He told me to calm down, to think it through. Of course, even when I slapped him with all the strength I had, he remained composed, looking at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. When I raised my hand again, he caught it midair, effortlessly. He pulled me into an embrace. The arms that once brought me warmth now made me feel nothing but cold. He persuaded me. My parents persuaded me. Even my best friend tried to talk me out of it. After all, to everyone else, including my parents, I didn't deserve Bruno anymore. I had simply gotten lucky. Stuck by his side through the hardest years of his startup, like early investors who struck gold. Now that he was rich and successful, I was just sitting back reaping the rewards. If I left him now, I'd lose everything and become a joke. Public opinion drowned me, and I wavered. To win me back, Bruno really pulled out all the stops. He sent gifts like a tidal wave. Not just jewelry, a yacht, even a private island. There was a pool villa and full-time butler on the island. He even cleared out 2 full weeks to take me there for vacation. We watched the sun rise over the sea, ate fresh-caught tuna, walked barefoot on the sand, watched the glorious sunset. He treated me even better than when we first fell in love. I almost believed him again, until, in the dead of night, fresh out of the shower, warm and damp, he embraced me from behind, and all I could think of was the chat history I saw on his phone, the girl's sweet words, daily life updates, cute little requests. He never replied, except when she asked him to pick out lingerie styles for her. He replied, just one word, but that one word clawed at my chest like a vice. Do you kiss her when you're in bed? I asked coldly. His hand paused on my waist. I yanked his hand away and ran into the bathroom. That delicious seafood dinner ended up as vomit in the toilet bowl. We were supposed to stay on vacation for 2 weeks. We went home after 2 days. Chapter 03. After that, I became something like a detective, obsessively inspecting his clothes for clues. No lipstick on his shirt, no perfume on his collar, spotless. I found nothing, but when he came home late again, that tightly wound string inside me finally snapped. I had a complete breakdown, and he responded by going cold. When I realized I had become a bitter, resentful woman, I panicked. The cruel irony? I found out I was pregnant. It should have been the best news of my life. I'd always wanted a baby, but I just couldn't get pregnant. We both went through medical tests. There was nothing wrong with either of us. It just didn't happen. We started planning for IVF. I took hundreds of hormone shots, endured all kinds of pain. Then I found out about his affair. The emotional stress was too much. I even had some bleeding at one point, but I couldn't afford to care anymore. I never thought that when this long-awaited little life finally came to me, I wouldn't want it anymore. I didn't tell Bruno. I went to the hospital alone for the abortion. When I woke up, I felt like my soul had been hollowed out. That's when Bruno appeared. His face was pale, eyes filled with disappointment. "Elise, is this how you're getting back at me?" "But the baby was innocent." "Exactly," I said. "That's why I couldn't let it be born. A child unloved is a tragedy." "Bruno, let's get divorced." I repeated it numbly. "No, I won't." He was more determined than I was. Chapter 04. 5 years have passed. Bruno and I are now strangers. The women by his side have changed too. His newest girlfriend, I heard, goes to a dance academy. Young, full of energy, soft and sweet. He must like her a lot. It's been over 6 months and he still hasn't replaced her. The last time I saw him was a few days ago. Very dramatic. He rear-ended my car on the overpass. Looked like he was taking the girl to the beach. She was wearing a floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She didn't know who I was. As soon as she got out of the car, she panicked and apologized. "Sister, I'm so sorry. It's my fault. I was trying to feed my boyfriend something in the car. He has a sensitive stomach and didn't eat breakfast." She bit her lip, glossy with pink lip tint. Her cheeks were flushed with a youthful glow. She was fresh and vibrant, gorgeous, hard to look away. "It's fine." I turned to Bruno and smiled faintly. "Next Thursday's our 10-year anniversary. Let's have dinner." Bruno said nothing, but the girl turned ghost white. She glanced between the two of us, then instinctively leaned into Bruno like a frightened bird. Bruno subtly stepped away. "I'll drive you back." "No need. I have things to do. Wouldn't want to ruin your plans." The collision wasn't bad, but the seatbelt had tightened around my stomach. I was worried it might have affected the baby. Back in my car, I was about to close the door, but his hand pressed against it. A shadow fell over me. "Elise, don't you have anything you want to say to me?" Bruno looked down at me, eyes dark. "Like what?" My tone was full of sarcasm. "Do you want me to scream and slap the other woman?" I chuckled. "Please, don't think I'm that childish. You gave me enough money, enough to buy your silence. Let's talk next week at dinner." Bruno kept holding the door, stared at me without blinking, something stormy hidden in his gaze. I looked back at him, calm. Eventually, he withdrew his hand. I stepped on the gas and changed lanes, exited the congested overpass. The road ahead was suddenly wide and open. 5 years of marriage. No baby. But after changing the father, getting pregnant was surprisingly easy. Seems like Bruno and I were never meant to be. Destined to walk different roads in life. Chapter 05. Because I gave him advance notice. Bruno arrived early, and even brought a gift. A carefully chosen ruby necklace. Top quality pigeon blood red. In the 5 years we lived apart, we barely saw each other, but his gifts never stopped. Always extravagant. From a worldly perspective, you could say I didn't lose out in this marriage. Let's get divorced. After I told him I'd cheated, that I was pregnant with another man's child, I placed the divorce agreement in front of him. I didn't want things to drag out, so I was generous with the property division. But when he heard I was giving up all my shares in his company, Bruno asked expressionlessly, "Is the baby Kevin's?" Before I could answer, he sneered, "So you're divorcing me, marrying him, and having his child? And then what? You really believe Kevin won't cheat on you?" I stayed silent. His voice grew sharper. "You believe in that bad boy reformed by love nonsense? He's slept with way more women than I have. Aren't you afraid of catching something?" Unlike self-made Bruno, Kevin came from an elite family, a notorious playboy in our circle. He was frivolous and flirtatious, but had a sharp business sense. He was Bruno's earliest investor. They were the same age, and their relationship grew from mutual interest into deep friendship. He used to call me sister-in-law all the time, and I had no shortage of admirers back then. I could tell, the way Kevin looked at me was far from innocent. That's why I picked him when I wanted revenge. Maybe it was the thrill of what he couldn't have, but Kevin really got attached. The child isn't his. But I didn't feel the need to explain that to Bruno. Bruno, you're not that young anymore. Didn't you once say you wanted a child? After we divorce, I steered the conversation away, gently trying to nudge him toward the future. But Bruno's lips tightened. His eyes landed on my belly. The look in them turned dangerous. I tensed immediately. Elise, he said, voice ice cold, you'll give birth to my child. Back then, Bruno refused to let me go. He threatened, bribed, even blocked every lawyer who dared take my case. By any means necessary, he wanted to preserve our broken marriage. Bruno, I don't want to make a scene. If you won't agree, I'll go to the media. Let's end this with dignity, please. But he still wouldn't let go. Exhaustion sank deep into my bones. I raised my hand to rub my temples, but he suddenly grabbed my wrist tightly. His voice was hoarse. Abort the baby. I'll give you anything you want. We won't get divorced. From now on, let's start over. Chapter 06. Bruno tried hard to convince me that divorce and remarriage was a foolish decision, just jumping from one fire pit into another. He spoke like someone who'd seen the world, trying to rationally explain the nature of men. Elise, you're too idealistic about marriage. Bruno, do you still love me? I still asked that stupid, meaningless question. Bruno knew he couldn't persuade me anymore, but when he heard my question, his dark eyes lit up for a moment. He was always a confident, even arrogant man, and with his charm and power, he had every reason to be, so he believed I still loved him. But when he found out I was pregnant, that belief shook. I love you. He finally said it. He stared at me. Elise, you're the only woman I've ever acknowledged as my wife. You're my family. I wasn't surprised by that answer. Back in college, his parents died in a car crash. I took the long-distance train with him back to his hometown, stayed up with him all night in the morning hall, went with him to deregister their household record. From that moment on, he was the only name left on his family register. Back then, I held his hand and told him, you still have me. From now on, I'm your family. Bruno looked so calm that day. You couldn't even see sadness on his face. But when night fell, he held me tight, his movements rougher than usual, again and again, restless and desperate. When I finally passed out from exhaustion, I vaguely heard him whisper, Elise, you're all I have. So many years have passed. Now he's adored by countless people. If he wanted, he'd never have to be alone again. Look at you. You've been just fine without me. Bruno opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. Do you remember 5 years ago? There was a time I disappeared. I had gone abroad, turned off my phone. He couldn't find me. Now that he was being this difficult, I had no choice but to play the emotional card. I went overseas for treatment. I had cancer. I almost died. I pulled down my collar, revealing the surgical scar. That child couldn't have survived anyway. They found a tumor during the prenatal checkup. Bruno trembled slightly, his voice strained. Why didn't you tell me? What was I supposed to do? Drag my husband off some other woman's bed to take care of his dying wife? People say no child is filial beside a sickbed. I didn't want to see the day you'd start resenting me. I didn't want him to know, so I told no one. They all thought I went abroad to relax. But none of them knew I'd walked through the gates of hell alone. Back then, I felt broken. After the surgery, I lay like a lifeless husk in that hospital bed, day after day. Bruno was like that tumor cut from my body, painful to remove. But eventually, the wound healed. I didn't die. I also weaned myself off Bruno, stopped depending on him, just like he'd always said he wanted me. Independent and strong. The day I walked out of that hospital, the sky was bright, Trees cast cool shade. Birds chirped. Flowers bloomed. My doctor smiled at me and said, 5 years without recurrence. Clinically, you're cured. My marriage was in shambles. But I had never felt so whole, and I believed I could do it. At 36 years old, I was born again. I love children. That's why I want this baby. It wasn't easy. I gently stroked my belly and spoke sincerely. Bruno. Let's part peacefully. Chapter 7. I don't think I'll ever understand men. When I thought Bruno loved me the most, he broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. And now that things have come to this, I thought he'd accept my request for a divorce. Yet he keeps compromising. Then keep the baby. I'll treat it like my own. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. I sighed helplessly. You know, the doctor told me this illness is often caused by long-term emotional repression and anxiety. The effect of emotions on the body is subtle but real. Negative feelings don't just disappear. They morph into hidden attacks on your health. Bruno's career kept climbing. The gentle, humble young man I married changed. He devoted more and more time to work. We talked less and less. Even the way people looked at us changed. We used to be a perfect match, talented and beautiful. Then slowly, I became not good enough for him. We disagreed about everything, from furniture arrangement to my own career plans. Everything had to follow his way. If I didn't agree, I was being immature. Whenever I argued with Bruno, it felt like I stood against the whole world. Even when he cheated, and I wanted a divorce, my own parents didn't understand me. In their eyes, Bruno was such a brilliant, outstanding man. I should treat him like a god. After all, he'd only made the kind of mistake every successful man makes. If I just closed one eye, I could live a comfortable, enviable life. Why make a mess? Besides, we'd been married for years and never had a child. He never once blamed me. So the conclusion was, I just didn't know how lucky I was. I want to be happy. Can you give me that? As expected. When I said happy, Bruno gave me that look again, like I was a silly, naive child. Of course I can. I smiled faintly. I also want to experience that kind of happiness in bed, where my partner prioritizes my feelings, is attentive and generous. Can you do that too? Bruno narrowed his eyes. Like I was being ridiculous. Sure, as long as I want to. He probably remembered that night on the island, and said nothing. Since then, we've never had sex again. See? You can't even give me that. Why is it shameful for an adult woman to desire physical pleasure, just like a man? Once a man has money and status, why is it considered unreasonable for a woman to ask for equality, companionship, and loyalty, things that should be natural in marriage? In the end, we parted on bad terms. Chapter 8. What's going on between you and Bruno? Why is he sending people to follow me again? Kevin called, asking in his usual slow, lazy tone. Back then, the two of them never confronted each other face to face. Smiles on the surface, knives behind the back. Even though Bruno knew I never actually slept with Kevin, he still played it cool, and set a trap that nearly ruined Kevin. Kevin lost a ton of money, and almost ended up in jail. But after all that, he didn't distance himself from me. On the contrary, he doubled down, courting me, relentlessly, for 5 whole years. He was the one who told me about Bruno's new girlfriend. He's probably the last person in the world who wants me and Bruno to get back together. Probably because I'm pregnant. He suspects you're the father. Kevin went silent for 5 seconds. So, whose is it? None of your business. I realized my tone was too blunt, so I softened it. Can you help me find a divorce lawyer? No problem. Then he added coolly, Elise. Sure, I'll help. But tell me who the father is. I didn't know why he, like Bruno, was so obsessed with figuring out who the father was. But I needed a favor. So I told him the truth. It was IVF. The baby was part of my plan. I thought that if Bruno believed I'd really cheated, he'd finally agree to divorce me. Kevin blurted out, IVF? Why the hell didn't you ask me to help? If I die, that kid could inherit my estate. You know. I guess I was aiming for genetic superiority. I thought I'd worded it gently, but Kevin was clearly pissed. He gave a cold laugh and shot back. So I'm too dirty for you? But your dear Bruno is squeaky clean? Chapter 9. Using the excuse of discussing legal matters. Kevin showed up with bags full of supplements and pregnancy supplies. See if you need anything else. Your bump isn't big yet, but you never know, accidents happen. Someone should be looking after you. How about I hired a housekeeper, a nanny, and a maternity nurse. Kevin raised an eyebrow and teased. Elise, why are you guarding yourself like a fortress? If I knew you were this cold, I would have skipped the whole gentleman act years ago. Kevin, this will never happen between us. He didn't respond. His gaze dropped to my belly. What if I volunteered to be the baby's stepdad? Then why would I bother divorcing Bruno in the first place? Just as I was about to kick him out, someone knocked at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Again and again. Even though there was a doorbell, they didn't press it. Kevin and I exchanged a look. He grinned wickedly. You think that's Bruno? Here to catch us in the act? Before I could answer, he strutted to the door like he owned the place. Standing outside, Bruno. Hey, bro, long time no see, compared to Kevin's smug ease. Bruno's face was blank, but his sharp eyes pierced right through Kevin and locked directly onto me. Elise, we're still legally married. The child isn't his. I knew Bruno wouldn't rest until he got an answer. The baby's father is younger than both of you. Healthy, with no genetic illnesses. Doesn't smoke or drink. No bad habits. Well educated. He understands me. With him, I feel at peace and free. I met Bruno's piercing gaze and said seriously, he's really good to me. Bruno's tone turned icy. Good? He knows you're married and a cancer survivor, and still wants to knock you up just to trap you? A sleazy gigolo hoping to get kept by a rich woman. That's your idea of good? I don't need your judgment. I know what I feel. I snapped back. You say you love me, but if I can't feel it, is it still love? Kevin chimed in, unhurried. Bruno, don't act like you were some amazing husband. If you were, she wouldn't have wanted to sleep with me just to spite you, with me acting like a woman blinded by love. And Kevin stoking the fire. Bruno stormed out, face like thunder, but the moment he left, Kevin turned to me. Elise, why do I get the feeling that guy you made up actually exists? Chapter 10. With Kevin's help, I finally found a lawyer willing to take my case. During the divorce proceedings, Kevin suddenly brought some intel, something that could work in my favor. Bruno's new flame was pregnant, but before we could figure out how to use this against him, the girl ended up in the hospital. The baby was gone. No evidence. But it was likely Bruno again. It wasn't the first time another woman had gotten pregnant by him. Back when I first mentioned divorce, some girl got pregnant, hoping to use the baby to climb up the ladder. Bruno didn't even hesitate. He told her to get rid of it. She refused. Then she had a car accident. Though injured, the fetus survived. The woman escaped from the hospital in the middle of the night. Bruno used every connection he had, legal and illegal, to track her down. No one knows if he gave the direct order. But during the chase, she panicked, fell down a flight of stairs. She nearly died. Her uterus was removed. The whole incident caused a major scandal. Bruno spent enormous resources just to cover it all up. No wonder he didn't come looking for me then. He had bigger fires to put out. That was the beginning of our drift apart. And to think, back then he didn't want a child. 5 years later, he's no longer young, and still doesn't want one. TSK. The moment I met Bruno, I knew he was ruthless. That's why he succeeded. Kevin commented. And then came to a new conclusion. Elise, maybe he really only ever wanted a child from you, even if it wasn't biologically his. Contradictory? Maybe. He seemed deeply attached to me, but that never stopped him from sleeping with other women. Heh, then he may end up never having a child at all. I hung up the phone, lowered my head, and touched my growing belly. My heart melted. Baby, Will you come back to find me? Chapter 11. The first court hearing. Bruno brought a top-tier lawyer and gave a polished, sincere speech, as expected. The judge did not grant the divorce. In the hallway, Bruno blocked my way. Elise. I checked the hospital records. You lied to me again. I knew it. You never liked Kevin. These past years, you didn't have a single man. Compared to our last meeting, Bruno looked worn out. He seemed genuinely exhausted. Since the baby is from IVF, why didn't you use mine? The hospital still had my sperm stored. Why do you think? I looked at him coolly and replied, obviously because I didn't want to. The air turned heavy. I supported my belly, turned, and walked away. Chapter 12. Before the second court hearing could happen, I gave birth. Advanced maternal age, plus a serious medical history, made the process risky. Bruno and Kevin waited outside the delivery room all night. It was a girl, so tiny, red and soft. I held her in my arms, and as I gazed at her peaceful sleeping face, a wave of happiness surged through me. Someone knocked on the hospital room door. A young man stepped in, white shirt, gray sweater, gold-rimmed glasses, clean, composed, scholarly. He walked to my bedside. His calm gaze fell on the baby in my arms. Do you want to hold her? I smiled. He hesitated. I knew he had serious misophobia, so I was teasing him on purpose. Okay. I was stunned. As he reached out and gently took the baby into his arms, he held her as if she were a fragile gem. Just then, Kevin walked in. Dr. Ethan. He recognized him and greeted politely. Ethan nodded. Kevin didn't mind the indifference. He was used to it. Ethan was my psychologist. After returning to China post-surgery, the fear of death still hung over me like a sword. I was frail, physically and emotionally. I was reborn from rock bottom, while healing my body. I also underwent therapy. At first, I tried a famous psychologist, a man the same age as my father. Maybe because of his seniority, he always seemed to look down on me, judging, lecturing. It felt like facing another Bruno. Before Ethan, I'd seen several psychologists, but none of them made me feel safe. Being Bruno's wife, privacy was crucial. I didn't want to end up in some tabloid headline. Kevin recommended Ethan. Ethan came from a wealthy family. By the time his family realized his mother had postpartum depression and was abusing him, he already showed signs of autism. A boy who didn't speak, disconnected from the world. Through treatment, he improved. But the damage was done. He had no interest in inheriting the family business. Went abroad and studied psychology. He was perfect for me, a qualified trash bin. He quietly absorbed my darkest thoughts and diagnosed the cracks in my marriage with brutal precision. Our values, worldviews, and outlook on life were fundamentally incompatible. He advised me to cut the cord for the sake of my mental health, and I finally saw clearly. Chapter 13. Let me hold the baby. Kevin reached out. Ethan gave him a sidelong glance, but didn't let go. Kevin, let him hold her. Kevin gave me a weird look, like he just sensed something. Elise, do I know this baby's father? He was this close to just asking if it was Ethan. Can't blame him for suspecting. I'd described the man as clean, disciplined. Both Kevin and Bruno sneered at that. But if it was Ethan, it all made sense. The baby girl resembled her father, even as a newborn. Her features faintly mirrored Ethan's. It's me, Ethan said calmly. I nodded. It's him. Kevin stared at him, then at me, then finally at the baby, grinding his teeth. F***ck. I introduced you to, and now I'm the damn matchmaker. We're not together. I said. Back then, convincing Ethan was no small task. He was my psychologist. But I knew he had serious germophobia and social difficulties. He couldn't form intimacy with women. Healer, heal thyself. But he hadn't. His trauma from his abusive mother still haunted him. Let me have this child. We'll raise her together. And in the process, maybe you can reparent yourself and finally grow up whole. Meeting Ethan made me grateful. I never gave birth back then. In that terrible mental state, I might have hated that child. A mother in pain hurts her child most. That baby came into my life like a silent redeemer. So after recovery, I longed for a child. I even started believing in reincarnation, hoping she'd return to me. And yes, choosing Ethan had personal reasons. If the worst happened, if my cancer came back, I trusted Ethan. I knew he'd take good care of this child. Chapter 14. Just as Ethan handed the baby back to me, Bruno stormed into the room. The child is his? Didn't you already hear everything? I had seen him in the corner of my eye, standing outside, hidden in the shadows. You've been going to therapy twice a week, so all these 5 years, were you secretly screwing around under my nose? Was that whole IVF story just a ploy to trick me? Bruno completely lost it. Before I could say a word, he threw a punch. His fist smashed hard into Ethan's jaw. Ethan fell to the ground, hard. Bruno. He withdrew his hand, looked up at me, eyes red and glistening. I told you I cheated and you didn't believe me. Now you think I faked medical records just to deceive you? Aren't you being ridiculous? I'm not like you, I said calmly. I can't separate love from the body. The baby is from IVF. Ethan and I are just friends. I gently patted the baby, who had woken up crying. My voice stayed steady. And you said you'd give me anything I wanted. So here's what I want. Please disappear from my life. Can you do that? We tore off all pretenses. In front of witnesses, Bruno trembled, head down. He turned slowly. Elise, calm down. We'll talk again next time. I thought he would keep fighting me, but to my surprise, Bruno agreed to the divorce. His lawyer redrafted the agreement. 50-50 split. Even the company shares I'd planned to give up, he offered to buy back in cash. It was a shocking sum. Kevin's lawyer reviewed it, no issues. I signed. We divorced quietly. Bruno left the country, and just like that, he vanished from public view. Chapter 15. 6 months later, Bruno's company appointed a new CEO. Kevin said he bought an estate in New Zealand, and seemed to be settling there for good. When I heard the news, I wasn't surprised. Over the past months, he kept sending me packages. They filled a whole room. Organic food, handmade items. He was such an ambitious man. Kevin mused. How did he suddenly go full country retirement mode? Was divorcing you that traumatic? Maybe he got sick, I replied. That's what everyone's speculating. But no one's seen him. He's disappeared from all social events. I didn't care much. Hung up the call. In front of the mirror, I clipped on my ruby earrings. The pigeon blood ruby necklace Bruno once gave me felt too extravagant, so I had it reworked into earrings. What a shame it would be, for such expensive jewelry, to stay hidden in a box. Ruby with a little black dress. Red lipstick, simple yet stunning. On the sofa, Ethan held the sleeping baby. He gave me a subtle look. Going out? Date night. I'm divorced. I have a child. I see no reason not to start fresh. Life is about many experiences. I don't want to be on my deathbed and realize Bruno was my only story, especially when the second half of it wasn't that pleasant. Even Ethan, as a psychologist, recommended this. Love yourself, love others, take chances, rebuild intimacy. Thanks for babysitting tonight. I smiled. Tomorrow I'll drive. Let's take the baby to the beach. Ethan didn't like crowded places, so when we went out, it was mostly nature, trees, sand. The baby, on the other hand, adopted Kevin as her godfather. Kevin loved people, loved malls, play areas, and told everyone, my girl's the smartest, prettiest in the world. These two men couldn't be more different, and yet, oddly balanced each other out. Chapter 16. 1 year later, late at night, I received a phone call. Miss, I'm sorry to disturb you at this hour. Mr. Bruno just passed away. I froze. Mr. Bruno was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. No current medical treatment could slow the disease. His memory had been deteriorating. Moments of clarity grew rare. I believe he briefly regained awareness and took his own life in the study. The psychological blow was immense. I went numb. Mr. Bruno had prepared a will. He designated all his assets to you. I have a request, if you're able to travel abroad. Bruno left behind an estate. He prepared many things for you and your child there. I think, before you decide to sell it, you should see it for yourself. Okay, I'll book a flight tomorrow. I looked over at the sleeping baby beside me, then turned to look at Ethan. 3 months ago, we started dating. I'd never met a man who truly moved me. Either they weren't my type, or we couldn't connect. Then Ethan suddenly said, "Let's try." I rejected him instantly. He meant too much to me. He was my therapist, my child's caregiver, irreplaceable. If things went wrong, the loss would be too great. I didn't want to risk it. But in the end, I gave in to temptation. We slept together, rain after drought, then again, and again. He was young, strong, smart. He had service instincts, and gladly pleased me. We clicked more and more. I experienced pleasure like never before. So, when Kevin showed up unannounced one day, and caught us red-handed, I casually gave Ethan an official title. "Whatever," Kevin said. "It's just dating, not marriage. And even marriage can end in divorce. Worst case? I'll just keep stealing him back." He really could take things lightly. This time, he flew with us. We've known him for years. Might as well see him off. Even though he and Bruno had long fallen out. Bruno's death came too suddenly. A dazzling business genius. Gone so tragically. Kevin looked genuinely shaken. The assistant came to pick us up at the airport. He had worked beside Bruno for many years. One of the few people Bruno truly trusted. Bruno had asked for no funeral. His ashes were to be sent home and buried next to his parents. He had bought the plot years ago, although Bruno once gifted me an island. Nothing quite prepared me for the sheer scale of this estate. An orchard, a farm, open pastures, a stable, and a lake. Its waters crystalline blue. The estate was in the southern hemisphere, when winter gripped the north. I could bring my daughter here. The car pulled into the villa. Ethan took our daughter to explore. While the assistant led me into Bruno's study, Kevin followed me in. But the moment he saw the walls, all 4 of them covered in photographs, he let out a curse under his breath. The photos showed his parents, and me, enlarged images from our honeymoon. We hadn't had much money then. We traveled cheap, spent what little we had on tickets and budget stays. Most of our meals came from food stalls. One photo showed me holding a selfie stick in one hand, and a skewer in the other. There was chili oil at the corner of my mouth. He leaned in to kiss me anyway. Smiling into the camera, the lens had captured all of it. 10 years ago, moments I had long forgotten. But we had been happy, once. Mr. Bruno's memory declined very rapidly. The assistant said gently, "By the last year, he only remembered his parents, and you. But he gave strict orders. We weren't allowed to contact you when his emotions became too unstable. The only thing that soothed him was looking at these photos. He'd sit here all day. So in his final year, his world was filled with strangers, and the people he remembered were nowhere near." I suddenly thought back to the last time I saw Bruno. He must have just gotten his diagnosis. Preparing to leave the country for treatment. I was at the park with my child, basking in the sun. He appeared quietly, just stood there, watching me, watching the stroller. His eyes turned red. Then he turned around. "Elise, goodbye." "Goodbye," I replied flatly, like to a stranger. "Mama, hug." A soft, milky voice echoed from afar. "My daughter." I couldn't help but smile, turning toward the sound. And then, that tiny body came stumbling toward me, throwing herself into my arms, soft, warm, and full of life.